Well, thanks for meeting with me today, Jamie. I'm really looking forward to unpacking some of this today with you. It's one of those gray areas in student affairs where higher education as a whole, we have these no right answer, no wrong answer. It's kind of just everyone, like one size does not fit all with humans. So we have to apply higher education to that as well and the challenges that come with that. So as professionals, I think we have to choose to navigate those bigger decisions with each other with these like conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think, sort of having these conversations surrounding, especially the idea of like failure and the different perspectives we've looked at. Um, I feel like there's such a balance between, you know, um, sort of ensuring student success while still allowing them to, you know, get comfortable with real world consequences of failure.
Yeah, exactly. It's that developmental balance of what we talk about in class, the supporting and challenging at the same time. And then there's the fine line of holding students and humans just in general accountable, but then also giving them grace and empathy with their situations and their challenges because the world could use more of that. So if you consider the theory of the example of Sanford's theory, we could apply that to student development and how too much challenge without enough support for students could lead to higher anxiety levels or more disengagement within the classroom. But then too much support without challenge can lead to stagnation and complacency, essentially.
Yeah, and I think it's, important to think about that, especially within the framework of like inclusivity and how we've really been talking about this, really diverse student population that we serve now, sort of understanding how some of those identities might have an impact on how they choose to handle certain situations, the amount of experience students have had with some of these challenges. So, for example, our, sort of prompt about the student budget. I know in my experience as a first generation student, there were a lot of times I was tasked with things my professors or people I was working with, thought that I already knew from experiential knowledge that wasn't, accessible to first generation students. And so I try to keep that in mind while still, understanding that giving grace might look different for each individual student, and sort of those consequences might have more weight for certain students than others.
Hmm. Totally. Because it's not just symbolic. It's going to be like if the deadline passes, then they might not get the funding for their programs or scholarship or some kind of example like that. But it's affecting a whole group and it's a domino effect. So there's that question of are we doing them a disservice if we step in and we rescue them from those outcomes, or are we doing them harm if we let that happen? Because they're losing access to important resources. But then you also have to consider that every student has come from a different background and that they're all battling with different like knowledge base and experience base. So it's really just giving grace at a certain point.
Mhm. Yeah, and I definitely think that, like, in addition to, giving them grace and sort of honoring their unique situations, also honoring that, in my opinion, failure really is that, first attempt in learning, that, you know, all of the best learning opportunities come from that not knowing how to do it perfectly the first time. And I think it's hard because we need to honor that if there's too strict of consequences, we're not giving them an opportunity to like rebound and learn from that experience. But, if there's too much support, like you said, they might not really understand the, consequences that the future might hold or, might stagnate. Um, so, yeah, I think sort of coming to that balance is really difficult and maybe even, individualized to each student or circumstance.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. I was going to align that part with, because I think it's important to like have standards that are kind of more custom to the student rather than, like I said earlier, like the one size fits all doesn't work. So, but you also have to have like fair standards for everyone to share. But marginalized backgrounds, that's like something I wanted to bring up with this, was that um, there was in the hot moments PDF there that we read, managing hot moments, there was a part in there called multi-partiality. I think that's how you would pronounce it. um, and it would remind you of the idea that facilitators have to hold space for everyone in a room, all the voices, but especially pay a little bit extra attention to those with less power or less privilege and marginalized, oppressed groups. So if we can apply a situation like this and think of it in a multi-partial facilitation method, like the PDF talked about, I feel like we can recognize that not every student's going to start from the same place in their academic journey, and understanding that deadlines and administrative systems and like the experience with it kind of comes with that, and navigating that with them. So there's like a little bit more fairness there. Are you a first gen student?
Yeah,
You are, right? Okay, that's what I thought.
yeah. So, yeah, I definitely resonate with that idea of like really being intentional about knowing our students' backgrounds and like how, we can sort of make the culture of how we handle these situations learning forward. And so, instead of having these, really insane consequences that might not align with a culture that inspires learning, we can say, here's where things might have went wrong. Here's how we can fix it, or let's collaborate on ideas on how to move forward. That sort of helps the student gain agency over the situation because
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times too, when we fail, we don't, you know, you mentioned the Hot Moments PDF. We sort of frame the moment in this, um, this is who I am. I'm just going to continue to fail. Or, a good example is because I got a bad grade in math, math just isn't for me. And sort of, helping them frame this less so as an attack on character or, their ability to, be capable in what they're doing, rather saying, okay, let's get curious about what went wrong here and how we can fix it next time so that they
Mm-hmm.
know, these are consequences we want to avoid, but there are different ways that I can approach the situation to do that.
Totally. Yeah, I like that point that you brought up about the math example, because they did poorly. The student is connecting it to their self worth. Um, and I feel like with the same thing, I had this happen yesterday actually, where someone was like, I hate reading. And then I asked them why, and they were like, well, I'm really slow at it. And it was more connected to like if I did it, there was a solution there. There was, if I did this more often and I worked on my reading skills, I could be a faster reader, and then maybe I would enjoy reading. Like there was like a domino effect of making that better and having a solution. And sometimes you just have to provide insight to a solution for people. And then, like with what you're saying, that framework, it's, as student affairs professionals, I think that it's our job to help them do that reframing of their experience and like their knowledge of things, maybe how they see their own self, and having it be told out loud by us or someone else can help with that. And then like shifting it from a label to more data, like having, here's my, instead of this is how I see myself, I'm this person or I'm this label, this is what I've done and here's what I've accomplished, here's my challenges, and that's my data. Like that's what I've done, but it doesn't have to be you know what I mean? So separating that failure and mistakes from the individual itself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.